what I wish I knew at 12. Power is easy to misuse, but Umar bin Abdul Aziz used it to lift people up. Born into royalty, Umar became caliph and turned away from luxury. He made laws fair, helped the poor, and even cut his own salary. People loved his honesty and his rule brought peace and hope. Umar's legacy? True justice always leaves a mark. Introduction. His name was Umar and his kunyat Abu Hafs. Kunyat is a special name whereby the father is called after a child or a dear one. Umar bin Abdul Aziz belonged to the royal family of Banu Umayyah. His father was the son of Abdul Aziz Marwan and the prince of the family of Banu Umayyah. In 65 Hijri, he was appointed the governor of Egypt. He became well known because of his exceptional services as governor. His mother, Asim, was the daughter of Asim bin Umar, the son of Umar Farooq, R.A., so she was the granddaughter of Umar, R.A., the respected companion of the Prophet, Saw. There is an interesting story behind how the marriage of Asim took place. One night, Umar, R.A., was taking a round of Medina, as was his usual practice during his caliphate. When he got tired, he rested against a wall. From a nearby house, he could hear a mother ordering her daughter to mix water with the milk that she would sell the next day. The girl replied that the Amir-ul-Mominin, the caliph, had forbidden this practice. The mother insisted that Umar was not present to see what she was doing. Her daughter was quick with her reply, "By Allah, it is not possible that when I am alone I disobey the caliph, because if he is not watching me, Allah certainly is." Umar, R.A., listened to this whole conversation quietly, and was so impressed by the girl that he asked his servant to mark the house and the door. In the morning, he was told that the girl was not married and her mother was a widow. Umar gathered all his sons together and asked them who needed a wife. He said that he would personally have married this wise girl if he had the desire, but since he was old and had no need for a wife, he would like one of his sons to marry her. His son Asim agreed to this proposal, and he and Layla, the milk girl, were married. The mother of Umar bin Abdul Aziz was the daughter of these two. Hence, Umar bin Abdul Aziz was the grandson of Umar, R.A., from the maternal side. Birth and childhood. According to authentic traditions, Umar bin Abdul Aziz was born in Medina in 63 Hijri. When he was young, his maternal grandfather passed away. His mother's uncle and famous companion of the Prophet, Abdullah bin Umar, R.A., used to take special care of them. Umar was very attached to his maternal relations. He often visited Abdullah bin Umar. When he returned from these visits, he would try to adopt the ways of his great-uncle. His mother, Asim, used to encourage him in matters of religion. However, she thought it a great challenge to reach a high status of the likes of Ibn Umar. When Umar bin Abdul Aziz's father was appointed the governor of Egypt, he called his family there to stay with him. In order to complete his education, Asim, while leaving for Egypt, left her son in Medina with her uncle Abdullah bin Umar, R.A., at his suggestion. Abdullah bin Umar, R.A., knew that his grandnephew was particularly attached to his maternal family. Hence he kept Umar with him. When Umar's father Abdul Aziz found out about this arrangement, he was delighted. From his childhood, Umar had a streak of nobleness in him. We find one interesting childhood event in the annals of history. Once he came to Egypt to visit his father. There he got injured when a donkey kicked him, which made him fall, and he suffered a minor injury on his forehead. When his brother Asbak found out, he started to laugh. When his father got annoyed at him for making fun of his brother's injury, he replied, "I am not happy at his fall. I am happy at the fact that until now, Umar had all the markings of a righteous man, but he did not have the mark on his forehead." It was a famous prediction in the tribe of Banu Umayyah that among their successors there would be a person who would have a mark on his forehead and he would fill the earth with justice. Perhaps some saintly person had seen this in a dream. Education and upbringing. Umar bin Abdul Aziz had memorized the Quran as a child. This was the era when most of the companions of the Prophet, Saw, had left this world, handing over their treasure of knowledge to the Tabaeen, next generation after the companions. Umar was fortunate in that he had exceptionally pious family links on his mother's side. Abdullah bin Umar, R.A. himself was his teacher. Besides that, Swaleh bin Kaysan, a famous Taba'i, was his mentor, who took keen interest in his education as well as grooming. Umar had a passion for dressing well since young age. Once when he was late for prayers, his teacher asked him for an explanation. He replied that he had been busy combing his hair. The teacher was surprised and admonished him for delaying his prayers because of his hair. Umar's parents found out about this incident. His father was well aware of his son's fondness for dressing up. He got Umar's head shaved to discourage his inclination towards fashion. Other famous tabi'ins like Ubaidullah bin Utbah and Sa'id bin Musayyab were also among those who taught Umar. We can thus assess the caliber of his education in his formative years. By the time he completed his education and came to Egypt and Syria, he was considered an eminent scholar. The famous scholar Allama Zahabi writes, Umar was a notable imam, a great scholar of fiqh, a big mujtahid, one who deduces solutions to new problems according to religious perspective, and was also a great and reliable scholar of hadith. Umar now became busy with the different posts he was assigned to in the kingdom, and this prevented him from pursuing further his scholarly interests. Marriage. After completing his education, Umar came back to his father in Egypt. In those days there was a dispute between his father Abdul Aziz and his uncle Abdul Malik regarding the heir apparent to the throne. Soon after, when Umar's father expired, his uncle Abdul Malik was very regretful about their disagreement. He cried a lot and called Umar to the capital Damascus, where he treated him like his own son. Also, he arranged his marriage with his beloved daughter Fatima. Fatima was a princess and had led a life of pomp and luxury. Umar's father had also left an immense fortune for his son. Both husband and wife had a luxurious lifestyle. Umar was a very fashionable young man. He used to dress in the finest of clothes, ate the best of delicacies, and rode fine horses. He rarely repeated his clothes. Some of his fine cloaks cost up to 800 dirhams, which was a lot of money in those times. According to Rija bin Hayat, Umar bin Abdul Aziz was the most well-dressed man of his time, wearing the best of perfumes and exhibiting a gait of pride. The governorship of Medina. After the death of Abdul Malik in 87 Hijri, his son Walid became the caliph and appointed Umar the governor of Medina. At this time, Umar was merely 25 years old. He reached Medina with his wife and servants with such pomp and show that 30 camels carried their belongings. Although his lifestyle was that of a prince of Banu Umayyah, he was against the policy of oppressing the poor to fill the treasury of the state. When Walid made him the governor of Medina, he hesitated in accepting the post. When he was questioned, he replied, I cannot practice the tradition of increasing the wealth of the state at the expense of the poor. At this, Walid sent him a reply saying that he was to govern Medina with justice, even if he did not contribute a single dirham to the treasury. As soon as Umar became the governor, he stopped the forceful extortation of taxes from the poor and sent a notice to all the respectable elites that if there was any injustice he was to be notified. Ibn Hakam writes that in spite of his lavish lifestyle, Umar never resorted to earning a living through unlawful means and never gave any order against the Sharia. Umar believed in the philosophy of a welfare state, hence he started big projects of social welfare. During his governance, wells were dug in the suburban areas of Makkah and Medina. The roads connecting Makkah, Medina, and Taif were reconstructed so that the travelers would be comfortable on their journey. Another of his important works was the reconstruction of Masjid-e-Nabi. Umar realized that the capacity of the mosque was inadequate to accommodate the increasing population. Although both Umar, R.A., and Usman, R.A., had increased the dimensions of the mosque during their caliphate, Umar asked Walid for his permission to reconstruct the mosque, which was granted. In a period of 3 years, the capacity of the Prophet's mosque was increased manifold, and it was reconstructed to give it a facelift. Umar himself took part as a worker in the construction. The mosque was beautified, and fountains, arches, and ponds were added to its surroundings. Another special characteristic of Umar's governance of Medina was that he included the scholars of Islam in his decision-making. He sent a special invitation to 10 of Medina's most esteemed scholars to assist and counsel him in the running of Medina. This was not an exercise in ostentation, but he truly valued the counsel and advice of these pious and learned men. Umar also asked them to lay down the foundation stone for Masjid-e-Nabi. Once Umar sent a messenger to the famous Taba'i and his teacher, Sa'id bin Musayyab, to ask about an issue. The messenger, instead of asking about the matter, sent the scholar to Umar. When he saw his teacher, Umar was very regretful and told him, "Please go back. I will come myself to you to ask your counsel." Because Umar valued religion so much, the scholars in Medina wished to keep in touch with him. When Umar left Medina, Sa'id bin Musayyab raised both hands and prayed for him. Dismissal or resignation. As mentioned earlier, Umar hated any kind of oppression and injustice. That is why he had a firm dislike for the ruler of Iraq, Hajjaj bin Yusuf, who was famous for his tyrannical and despotic rule. When Hajjaj intended to visit Medina after performing Hajj, Umar wrote a letter to Walid saying that he would not like Hajjaj visiting Medina. Walid, after reading the letter, conveyed the sentiments to Hajjaj and asked him to comply with Umar's request. This caused a lot of rancor in Hajjaj's heart against Umar. According to one tradition, when Umar wrote a letter to Walid about Hajjaj's tyrannies, Hajjaj also wrote a letter to Walid complaining that Umar was giving refuge to the agitators in his domain. Walid accepted the perspective of Hajjaj and dismissed Umar from his post. Another tradition tells us that Qubayb, the son of Abdullah bin Zubair, R.A., once did something to anger Walid, who ordered Umar that Qubayb should be whipped 100 times. Until now, in his 6 years of rule over Medina, Umar had not let Walid interfere in his domain and had not accepted any unjust order from him. Whatever the circumstances, it appears that this command was carried out. Qubayb was a weak man physically, and the perpetrator was harsh in his punishment. On reaching home, Qubayb could not bear the pain of the injuries and passed away. Upon hearing of Qubayb's death, Umar collapsed on the floor and went into intense depression and regret. Umar did not care for his post or position in the face of such cruelty and resigned from his post. Contradicting this tradition, Ibn Kathir has stated with confidence that Umar did not resign, but he was removed from his position. Whatever the true situation might be, it is obvious to all that Umar maintained a fair and just rule over Medina during his 6 years of governorship and became famous for his piety. After his dismissal, he returned to Damascus, the capital of the Muslim Empire. He stayed with his royal cousins for the next 6 years and advised them in matters of the state. First Walid and later Suleiman bin Abdul Malik would at times act on the advice given by Umar and at other times do things on their own. Once Umar and Caliph Suleiman had an altercation. Matters worsened to the extent that Umar decided to move to Egypt, but in time Suleiman apologized and admitted that he was most upset at Umar's plans to move to Egypt. Caliphate. In the month of Safar, 99 Hijri, Caliph Suleiman fell extremely ill. When he lost all hope of regaining his health, he issued an order to the royal princes to dress up in their finery and appear before him carrying swords. The princes were so young that they could barely handle their heavy robes, let alone lift their swords. When Suleiman saw this state of affairs, he was saddened. He consulted the famous scholar Riyah bin Hayat. When Riyah suggested Umar's name, the caliph told him, "I will make such a nomination that Satan will have no part to play in it." Then he proceeded to nominate Umar bin Abdul Aziz, and then Yazid bin Abdul Malik after him. The political wisdom behind nominating the latter was that the caliph could not ignore the clan of Abdul Malik, the ruling Umayyad family. According to another tradition, when Suleiman was convinced that he would not survive for long, he wanted to nominate his son Ayyub and then Daud for the caliphate. When he consulted Riyah, he told him to select a noble candidate so that Suleiman could die peacefully, knowing that the caliphate was in able hands. Riyah wanted to bring his attention to his cousin Umar. The caliph was still unconvinced about what decision to take. He asked, "What do you think of my son, Daud?" Riyah replied that he was currently involved in a war in Constantinople, and there was uncertainty about his return since a large part of his force had already been killed. Then Suleiman inquired about Umar. Riyah was quick to give his approval and praised Umar's pious and noble nature. Thus Suleiman nominated Umar bin Abdul Aziz and then Yazid as successors. With his own hands, he wrote out the nomination papers. He gathered his entire family around Riyah and got their consent for his decision. After the death of Suleiman, Riyah hid this information for a while and took a unanimous vote in favor of Umar bin Abdul Aziz once again so that there would be no dispute later. After the people had pledged their loyalty, then he disclosed the news of Suleiman's death. He then proceeded to read out the nomination orders of the caliph. When the papers were read out, Umar was present in the crowd. He panicked because he had already told Riyah to decide against him if the caliph nominated him. Umar approached Riyah and beseeched him to take back the nomination orders on account of their friendship and for the sake of Allah. He did not want to take on such a heavy responsibility, but Riyah would not agree with him under any circumstances. With extreme reluctance, Umar stepped onto the pulpit reciting "Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi rajiun," recited at the time of death or sorrow. Then he spoke out to the people, "By Allah, I never aspired to become the caliph secretly or openly." Then he gave a sermon in which he proclaimed, "O people, this position has been thrusted upon me without my consent. In this decision, the counsel of the Muslims was not taken. I release you all from the pledge that you have taken. Choose whoever you will for this post." the people unanimously replied, "We have chosen you and we are pleased with you." The only person to protest against this decision was Hisham bin Abdul Malik, but he was strongly put down by Rija. The difference between caliphate and kingship. Before we talk about the challenges to Umar bin Abdul Aziz and how he faced them, it is necessary to highlight the difference between caliphate and kingship. The cornerstones of caliphate during the times of the rightly guided caliphs were the council of advisors, respect for public opinion, and their right to choose their ruler. The rightly guided caliphs had very high standards of excellence and were very pious people. Their hearts always trembled with the fear of Allah. In matters of justice, they did not distinguish between friend and stranger. They were very cautious in spending the wealth of the state treasury. Not a single dirham was spent for undue reasons. Their personal lives were very simple. The awareness of the fact that they would be held accountable for their deeds in the hereafter, particularly with respect to the rights of those governed, made them vigilant and unable to rest peacefully for a single moment. After the death of Ali, R.A., Amir Muawiyah, R.A., became the next caliph. He belonged to the family of Banu Umayyah. He nominated his son Yazid after him. This way of nomination was alien to the Muslims. Muawiyah was a companion of the Prophet, S.A., and he had experienced the era of the Prophet, Sa, as well as the glorious rule of the rightly guided caliphs. Hence, after becoming the caliph, he tried to establish his rule on the same foundations as his predecessors. But the nomination of Yazid changed the caliphate into a kingdom, and the trend of dictatorship entered into the Islamic world. All the special foundations and ground rules laid down by the Prophet Sa and his companions were discarded one by one. Firstly, injustice and oppression became the order of the day, and the innocent were victimized. The reason for this was that the common Muslims had no say in the creation of Banu Umayyah's kingdom. When the system of caliphate fell apart, the people raised a hue and cry and became strong opponents of the tyranny imposed upon them. Hence, we see that in the reign of Yazid, the bloody assassination of Imam Hussein, R.A., took place which shook the entire Islamic empire. Waves of discontent and anger could be felt everywhere. The people started hating Banu Umayyah and developed a strong sympathy for the household of the Prophet, S.A., commonly referred to as Al-Bayt. The government in their sermons started maligning Ali, R.A., and his family, which further stoked the fire of discontent. When the supporters of Ali, who believed that the caliphate should only reside with the family of the Prophet, S.A., started speaking against the caliphs of Banu Umayyah, they were punished severely. Any kind of political opposition was unacceptable and was made a target for persecution. The Caliph Suleiman meted out harsh treatment on the basis of personal enmity, and he tortured many famous Muslim generals and honorable persons. The well-known conqueror of Sind, Muhammad bin Qasim, was put to death. Likewise, the mastermind behind the conquest of Spain, Musa bin Nusayr, was targeted for persecution and was badly humiliated. Tariq bin Ziyad, who won the war at Gibraltar, was a general in Musa's army. If this wasn't enough, Banu Umayyah used Hajjaj bin Yusuf to increase the domination of the ruling family at any cost. He was such a cruel man that he rained stones on the Kaaba on one occasion, laid siege to Medina on another occasion, and gave orders for the murder of Abdullah bin Zubair, Sa'id bin Jubair, and other pious companions and Taba'in. In spite of the magnificent principles of social and economic justice laid down in Islam, the ruling family of Banu Umayyah treated the new non-Arab converts in a hostile manner. Not only were they not given their equal rights as fellow Muslims, they were also subjected to unjust policies. Every new governor would impose new taxes on them. During Hajjaj's rule, they had to pay jizya as well, a tax imposed on non-Muslims. This went on to such an extent that some converts left the fold of Islam and became rebels. The only purpose of these unjust taxes was to fill the state treasury with wealth, which had become the personal treasury of the caliph. The resources of the state were at his discretion to be used for his comfort and to support his luxurious lifestyle. Palaces were constructed for the royal family. The Umayyad caliphs were so obsessed about their security that when Caliph Walid went to Medina to inspect the reconstruction job of Masjid-e-Nabi, the whole mosque was emptied of people before he stepped in. This system of government was opposed to the spirit of Islam and possessed all the bad characteristics of a monarchy. It had not been long since the era of the Prophet, Sa, and his companions. The masses in general and the scholars, the Taba'in and the Taba'in in particular, hated the non-Islamic practices that had filtered in the caliphate. But the powerful ruling family was so brutal that they ruthlessly suppressed any kind of protest. We have before us the examples of the atrocities committed on Imam Hussein, R.A., and Abdullah bin Zubair, R.A. Hence, these noble persons for the time being chose to remain silent in the face of such extreme persecution. Umar bin Abdul Aziz, the fifth rightly guided caliph. This state of affairs was not hidden from Umar bin Abdul Aziz, who used to counsel his cousins heading the caliphate. But his best efforts could not bring a change in their way of governance. Now the burden of the caliphate had fallen on Umar's shoulders. It was such a heavy burden to bear that at first he wanted to disentangle himself from its clutches. He accepted that people ought to be free to choose their caliph and proposed to resign. The people knew his character very well. They had been reluctantly accepting the rule of the tyrannical chiefs of Banu Umayyah. They knew Umar was the best choice among them all. Hence they all voted for the leadership of Umar and did not accept his resignation. Immediately after this election, a group of horses was brought for Umar's transport. A grand arrangement of tents and decorative floors was prepared for him. Umar stated that he had no need for all this pomp and show. Then he ordered his servant Mazahim to deposit these in the state treasury. According to the custom, a team of guards started walking with him for his defense. Umar found this to be very offensive. He told them, "I don't need you. I am also a Muslim like other Muslims." Then he went to his house. He informed his wife Fatima about his appointment as a caliph. Then he demanded her to deposit all her jewelry and other expensive possessions in the state treasury. He gave her the option of either living with him or leaving him. Fatima was a princess, but she was a noble person and had a kind and God-fearing nature. Living with a person like Umar had also made an impact on her personality. She agreed to his demand. The next day, the family of the deceased caliph, Suleiman, sent all the expensive furniture and other stuff to the house of the new caliph. When Umar found out, he deposited the items into the public treasury. He was presented with beautiful slave girls who were unique in their beauty. On his orders, they were sent back to their families and households. Caliphate, a trust. The burden of the caliphate took away any peace of mind that Umar possessed. He forgot about his wealth, estate, and worldly desires. He became so careless about these things that his wife Fatima says, Umar had dedicated himself to the Muslims. He used to think about them all the time. If their grievances were not redressed by evening time, he would continue working late in the night. When he would finish his work, he would ask for a lantern, pray 2 rakats of salat. Then he would lower his head in his hands, and tears would fall down his cheeks. He used to cry with such intensity that it would appear that his heart would burst, and he would collapse and die. Then dawn would arrive, and he would keep a fast. Sometimes I would go near him and ask if I did not have the same rights on him as I did before. He would tell me to leave him on his own. I used to request him to talk to me. He used to reply that he had been made the guardian of this ummah, that all he could remember was the hungry, the poor, the travelers who had no one to help them, and the innocent prisoners, and the people who had little wealth, and such others occupying different territories and different countries. He would say that he knew Allah, SWT, would question him about them, and so would Prophet Muhammad, SAW. He was fearful that Allah would not accept his excuses, and the Prophet SAW would not listen to his logic. Umar was aware that the caliphate was not his personal right, but a trust given to him by Allah. He knew that all the wealth accumulated by the ruling family had actually been obtained through tyrannical policies and unfair taxes from the poor people. He felt that as a caliph he should feel the actual pain that the masses were suffering. It could only be possible if he came down to their level to assess things. This created a revolution in his life. The same Umar bin Abdul Aziz, whose shawl used to cost 800 dirhams, now wore ordinary attire. He used to be displeased at any formal protocol given to him. Also, he dismissed the custom of sending blessings, durud, on the caliph after the prayers, and stated, "Durud is only reserved for the Prophet, SAW, and prayers should be said for all the Muslims. If I am one of them, then I would be automatically included." The trend that he introduced was a novel one for the family and servants of Banu Umayyah. Once at a funeral, a special sheet was laid for Umar to sit on. He removed the sheet with the end of a walking stick and sat with the rest of the Muslims. The process of reforms and the return of usurped wealth. Umar bin Abdul Aziz had started the process of change and improvement with his own self, but a thought was constantly nagging him. How would all the wealth that had been accumulated in the previous eras by his family members be accounted for? He knew that the properties owned by his relatives had been usurped from others by unfair means. This was a delicate issue. While expressing his thoughts one day, he said to his servant Mazahim, "There are some estates in our possession over which we have no right. We should not have accepted these properties. Now that the caliphate has come to me, it is incumbent upon me to account for them." Mazahim inquired what would happen to his children if he gave away the properties. Umar replied that Allah would provide them with sustenance. Mazahim discussed this issue with Umar's son Abdul Malik, who was even more pious than his father. He came running to his father and told him to act upon his intention and not to worry about them. Umar bin Abdul Aziz spoke, "Next Friday there should be a public announcement in the mosque regarding these unlawful properties." The noble son asked if he was certain that he would be alive till Friday, since this temporary life could not be trusted. He urged that there should be no delay in performing acts of goodness. Umar bin Abdul Aziz was very pleased with his son's support on his decision. Immediately, he made an announcement in the mosque that anyone whose property had been unlawfully seized by Umar's forefathers could come and reclaim it. Then he proceeded to return his entire property to the rightful owners, to the extent that he even returned his ring, given to him by Walid, to the state treasury. Then he gathered his family members together and said, "O Bani Marwan, you have received a large share of wealth and honor. I think half or 2/3 of the wealth of the Ummah is in your possession." When his family members became aware of his intention, they lost control of their emotions. They exclaimed, "By God, till our heads are severed from our bodies, we will not return these estates." Umar bin Abdul Aziz replied in an equally loud voice, "By God, if you don't do the rightful thing, I will leave you in a wretched state." After that, he made a speech in the mosque in which he assured the people that they would get their properties back. Umar then ordered for the chest containing the documentation of the estates to be brought before him. Mazahim would read out one document after another, and Umar bin Abdul Aziz would cut them up with a pair of scissors. The most important issue was that of the area of Fidak, which was under his own control, and the income of most of his family and relatives came from this estate. This area had specifically been the property of the Prophet, S.A., who used to distribute the earnings to the needy ones in his clan and the clan of Banu Hashim. The rightly guided caliphs had also maintained this order. In the later Umayyad rule, it was made the personal property of Marwan bin Hakam. Umar had inherited one portion of this estate through his father, and now the other portion also came under his possession as the ruler after the demise of Walid and Suleiman. Umar bin Abdul Aziz pronounced, "Rasul Allah, saw, used to use the land of Fidak for the sake of Allah." The same was done by Abu Bakr and Umar. When Marwan took over this property by force, I also chanced to inherit a part of it. I am depositing this illegally inherited property back in the state treasury so that it can be used for the same purpose as it was used in the time of the Prophet, Saw. He also renounced the land of Yamama and gave it back to the treasury. Besides depositing his personal cash of 40,000 dirhams, he surrendered the clothes of his wife and the jewels that he had inherited from her father. His wife Fatima had a slave girl whom he liked. After becoming the caliph, he asked the slave girl one day, "How did you come into the possession of Fatima?" She answered that Hajjaj bin Yusuf had put a penalty on the ruler of Kufa. She was owned by the ruler who gave her to Hajjaj, and Hajjaj passed her on to Abdul Malik, who was the father of Fatima. Umar further asked what was the state of that ruler of Kufa. She informed him that he was dead, but that his children were living in a poor condition. Umar bin Abdul Aziz summoned the family and returned their possessions, including the slave girl, to them. When she was leaving, the slave girl asked Umar, "What happened to your love for me?" He replied, "It is still there. In fact, its intensity has increased." In the entire Muslim empire, all the rulers and governors were advised that illegal properties were to be returned to their rightful heirs. When this mission was embarked upon, the treasury of Iraq became empty. The salaries given to Banu Umayya were discontinued. Also, the custom of giving allowances and expensive gifts to the favorites of the caliphs was also put to an end. Opposition of the family. The clan of Banu Umayya did not imagine in their wildest dreams that a man of their own family would declare their entire holdings to be illegal and return them to the rightful owners. Further, it was impossible to even think that their allowances and salaries would be suspended. Subsequently, the whole family gathered and decided to send their aunt to knock some sense into her nephew. This aunt had also lost all her privileges, Hence she appeared before Umar bin Abdul Aziz to plead the case of the entire clan and to question the sudden suspension of her income. Umar replied, "Oh, my dear aunt, my uncle Abdul Malik and my cousins Walid and Suleiman used to give you allowances from the Beit ul Mal, state treasury. This wealth is not mine. I can give you a grant from my own possessions." The aunt inquired how much he possessed. He replied that he received 200 dirhams annually. His aunt sorrowfully replied that she had no use for it, being such a petty amount. Another tradition tells us that Umar asked for a dinar and heated it over a fire. Then he put a morsel of meat on it which burned to a crisp. Umar said, "Oh, aunt, beware that your nephew will meet a similar end." The aunt went back with a small face to Banu Umayyah and told them, "You marry into Umar's RA family, and when his offspring turns out to be on the maternal side, you make a hue and cry. Now be patient." Remember that the mother of Umar bin Abdul Aziz was the granddaughter of second Caliph Umar bin Khattab. After this, Hisham bin Abdul Malik came to Umar and suggested that he should leave the past alone and should only decide matters that occurred in the present. Umar replied, "I would judge every matter brought to me according to the Book of Allah, be it current or of the past." A nephew of Umar sent him a harsh letter and accused him of breaking family ties. Umar replied in equally harsh terms, "If I had enough time, I would take every bit of Allah's property from you people and distribute it amongst the Muslims. You and your family have been accustomed to oppressing the people for long. By God, you deserve to be made slaves and sold off, and your price be distributed among widows and orphans. Even after this, you won't be able to compensate for the excesses you have been perpetuating on the Muslims." The withdrawal of illegitimate taxes. After disposing off the illegal holdings of Banu Umayyah, Umar turned his attention to the state treasury. A large portion of it was collected by unfair means. Further, the wealth was not distributed according to the Sharia. The poor and needy often did not benefit from the distribution system. The first step Umar took was to stop the exploitation of the poor in terms of unfair taxes. He observed that there were too many taxes levied on the masses. There were taxes on melting of silver, submitting applications, shops, houses, windmills, and even on marriages. Umar did away with all these taxes which relieved the masses of the crippling burden, and they breathed a sigh of relief. In the days of Hajjaj, jizya, a tax levied on non-Muslims, was collected from those newly converted to Islam, in gross violation of Sharia and an unwelcome innovation in the religion. Umar ended this unfair tax. This resulted in people converting to Islam en masse, especially in Egypt, causing a heavy depletion of the income of the state, so much so that the government had to borrow funds to furnish allowances. When an official complained, he remarked, "The Prophet, Isa, was sent as a guide, not as a tax officer, to extort taxes from the people." The strange thing was that despite the reduction in the number of taxes and the leniency showed in their collection, the period of Umar bin Abdul Aziz exhibited a remarkable increase in the amount collected after the initial period of difficulty. He himself stated proudly, "May Allah send his curse on Hajjaj. He was incompetent both in worldly and religious matters." Umar bin Khattab, R.A., collected 10 crores 28 lakhs from Iraq, Ziyad collected 10 crores 25 lakhs, and Hajjaj, in spite of his unjust rule, netted an amount of just 2 crores 80 lakhs from the people. Despite the scarcity in Iraq, when it came under my command, I collected a sum of 10 crores 24 lakhs from there, and if I am alive, I will collect an even bigger amount than Umar bin Khattab. Umar considered the treasury to be a sacred trust and took precautions to safeguard the interest of the public. He would take extra care in spending public money. If a single coin went missing, an inquiry would be carried out. Non-productive government expenses were reduced. When he was asked to increase the budget for stationery for official use, he ordered, "Use your pens thinly and word your letters closely in every line. Be careful in your expenditure. I do not want to approve of any expense from the state treasury which is of no benefit to the people." His written orders were also short and concise. All the governors were notified to use small writing and smaller size of paper in order to conserve resources. On a personal level, he was extremely cautious. When doing any personal work, he used to make sure that his own lantern was used and not the state utilities. When he was offered water for ablution which had been warmed over coals owned by the state, he returned the water. At times his servants did not exercise much care in these matters. Once his servant brought honey for him while riding an official horse that belonged to the post office. Umar bin Abdul Aziz sold the honey and deposited the amount in the state treasury. This caution extended to the members of his household as well. Once his daughter sent him a precious stone and requested that he find a similar one from the state treasury so that she could wear a matching pair of earrings. In response to her request, he sent 2 embers of fire. Contrast this cautious approach in personal matters with the generosity demonstrated in spending money for rightful purposes. Lists of the names of the poor were compiled. A special allocation was made for the loan repayments of those deserving. Allowances were fixed for suckling infants. At many places, food was distributed freely among the poor and the needy. When the funds in the state treasury were employed to relieve the disabled and the needy, within a year the recipients of charity became the donors, and the general condition of the masses improved dramatically. We know through authentic traditions that when officials would go out in search of deserving people to distribute charity, they could not find any in this category. Careful selection of governors and their accountability. Banu Umayyah had not been selective in their choice of governors/officials, and they had also given them free rein to behave as they wished. As long as the administrators carried out the orders of the caliph, just or unjust, the ruling family would remain happy with them. They did not care about the common man suffering under their tyrannical rule. Immediately after becoming the caliph, Umar dismissed 3 rulers who were known for their oppressive governance and for giving punishment without due reason. The entire family of Hajjaj bin Yusuf was expelled from Yemen, and their allies who were at important posts were dismissed. A cruel practice in vogue was the forced reduction in prices of products which were purchased by the government at low prices. This practice was most prevalent in Persia. Umar wrote to the officials there, "It has come to my knowledge that your subordinates purchase fruits at unjustly low prices and then extort taxes on the fruits from the travelers. If I happen to find out that this practice is being carried out with your knowledge or your approval, I will not spare you." While appointing officials, Umar bin Abdul Aziz used to keep certain principles in mind: that they should not be his relatives, that they should not ask for the post, that they should not be tyrannical. Rather, they should be well versed with the Quran and be devout followers of Islam. For his personal advisory council, he had appointed competent individuals like Riya bin Hayat, Maimun bin Mehran, and his pious son, Abdul Malik. After selecting the officials, he used to liaise with them regularly. He sent them letters of advice to guide them in their job. If there were complaints from the subjects against the rulers, he carried out an investigation. Those rulers whose performance was not up to the standard were removed. He was not in favor of meting out strict punishments. Rather, he thought they were answerable to Allah for their actions. Protection of the rights of non-Muslim subjects. Umar bin Abdul Aziz paid great attention to the rights of zimmis, non-Muslim subjects. Previously, no one cared about their life or property. Jizya, tax, was collected from them through unfair means. Umar made the blood money of a non-Muslim equal to that of a Muslim. Any Muslim who usurped the property of a non-Muslim was given strict punishment. The officials were instructed not to adopt harsh measures when they went to collect taxes from them. Measures were taken to provide allowances from the state treasury for the disabled or needy non-Muslims. Their usurped properties were returned to them. Thus, they were given a respectable status in the society. This was reflected in law courts too, where the royal family members had to stand side by side with the non-Muslims in hearings. Once Hisham bin Abdul Malik, and on another occasion, Muslima bin Abdul Malik were placed together with a zimmi in a case hearing to which they both objected. Umar told them to get a lawyer if they had a problem with standing together with a non-Muslim. Rule of justice. The more advanced a society is, the better its system of administering justice. The rule of law is an important indicator of the moral health of a people. A government cannot be called Islamic if it inherently practices injustice. The Umayyad period saw a decline in moral and economic justice, and a good example was the usurping of properties by unfair means mentioned earlier. The Umayyad kings in their time would imprison anyone without a trial about whom they had the slightest suspicion. Suleiman and his appointees used to make their opponents blind, break their hands and feet, imprison them, and make them starve. Hajjaj was famous for spilling blood over the minutest of crimes. For Umar bin Abdul Aziz, these practices were intolerable. He discontinued the law of imprisoning without any proof. He also put an end to the barbaric system of giving women as blood money in exchange for a man. There were some areas where people were kidnapped, enslaved, and forced to work for free. Umar abolished this practice altogether. Restoration of rights of Banu Hashim. Banu Umayyah took away the rights enjoyed by Banu Hashim to a large extent. Umar bin Abdul Aziz made sure that all their privileges were returned to them, to the extent that Fatima bint Hussein, daughter of Imam Hussein, sent him a letter of gratitude for his kind treatment. Since the beginning of the Umayyad rule, the Friday sermons used to contain derogatory words against Ali, R.A. As soon as Umar became the caliph, he sent an order to all the governors to stop the use of derogatory words for the eminent companion of the Prophet, Esau. He replaced those words with this verse from the Quran: Allah adjoins justice, kindness, and charity to relatives, and forbids vulgarity, wrongdoing, and tyranny. Maybe you will understand. This verse is quoted to this day in Friday sermons all over the Muslim world. Improvement of prisons. It is usual to find governments who do not care about the condition of their citizens to be oblivious to the situation in prisons. Before the caliphate of Umar bin Abdul Aziz, the jails were in a deplorable state of affairs. Prisoners were treated like creatures from another planet. Their basic health, sanitary, nutritional, and other needs were completely neglected, to the extent that when they died, their shrouds were not arranged. The inmates would collect funds from each other to perform the last rites of a deceased comrade. Umar bin Abdul Aziz took a serious view of the situation and advised his governors repeatedly to adopt measures to improve the condition. He passed orders for the construction of bright and spacious prison cells instead of the prevalent dreary ones. The governors were responsible for redressing the pleas of the inmates. Provisions were made for the basic needs of the prisoners. They were to be provided with blankets in the winter season and cool shirts in the summer. Their medical expenses were to be taken care of by the government. Separate prisons were to be built for the women prisoners. If an inmate died in jail, the state would be responsible for the last rites and burial. Prisoners were to be released from their chains in the night and during prayer times. Thus, like other classes of people, the prisoners breathed a sigh of relief during the philanthropic rule of Umar bin Abdul Aziz. Revival of Sharia. The masses of a country generally follow the example laid down by the rulers. They get influenced by the values that the rulers possess. The Umayyad era was a reign of kingship and royalty. Hence, materialism had set in. The main topics of conversation among people were wealth, women, and buildings. The knowledge and implementation of Sharia were no longer given prime importance. The first attack was on the Islamic belief system. Instead of focusing on implementation of basic and simple Islamic principles, people began to indulge in arguments and philosophical talk. When the conversation turned to fatalism, Umar made every effort to turn the people away from this useless discussion. He called Ghailan Damashki, the one who was stimulating these discussions of fatalism, and asked him to seek forgiveness of Allah. Once a man inquired about a complex issue. Instead of answering him, Umar bin Abdul Aziz gave him this priceless advice: adopt the religion of school children and of Bedouins in the desert, meaning that simplicity of religious beliefs is required. Besides the beliefs, the next hit was performance of religious duties which people started to neglect. People had begun to ignore the timings of prayers. Umar bin Abdul Aziz ordered his governors to leave all work at the time of Salah, stating, "The one who is negligent about prayers is the one who is most negligent about all Islamic duties." It came to his notice that, like in the times of ignorance, women were indulging in wailing and loud mourning over the deceased. He sent an order to all top officials. "I have heard that the women of ignorance indulge in weeping and tearing their hair out over their dead. Stop this kind of mourning at once." He also sent instructions regarding the rising trend of singing and music. The non-Arabs used to seek pleasure in activities that Satan had made dear to them. Stop the Muslims from indulging in frivolous activities, and those who refuse to obey should be chastised with a mild punishment. Similarly, public baths were common, in which men and women used to take baths without much care for modesty and dignity. Umar barred women from entering these public bathrooms and made sure that the men wore a loincloth while taking a bath. The walls of the bathrooms used to have vulgar pictures on them. Umar bin Abdul Aziz ordered for such pictures to be erased. Once he erased some of these paintings himself and stated that if he had known the name of the artist, he would have surely punished him. Besides other frivolities, drinking had become a common trend. People would ferment alcohol on the pretext of making nabiz, a sweet drink. Then they would get intoxicated and behave in an inappropriate manner. When they were questioned about their behavior, they would feel no shame in acting in an obnoxious manner. Umar took full measures to eliminate this menace and issued directives to the effect that non-Muslims could no longer bring alcohol to the cities. the wine shops and cellars were closed down. Compilation of Hadith. Umar bin Abdul Aziz was a scholar and he recognized the value of knowledge. He was afraid that after the eminent scholars would pass away, they would take the treasure of a hadith with them. He ordered the governor of Medina, Qazi Abu Bakr, to begin the compilation of a hadith. Once compiled, he distributed the same to all parts of the Islamic Empire. According to one tradition, piles and piles of ahadith were recorded. This was the first effort at the government level to compile the existing ahadith into a collection. Benevolent works. Extensive plans were made in the reign of Umar for the benefit of the poor and the needy. Road-inns were built. Instructions were issued to the effect that whoever passed by these motels should be offered 1 day of free services and his riding animal should be taken care of. Free food kitchens were arranged to provide food for the needy and the beggars. The state pastures were opened to the public for the grazing of their animals. Conquests. No memorable victories on the battlefield took place during the period of Umar bin Abdul Aziz. He was one of those rulers whose eyes were constantly on the internal reforms of his empire rather than the expansion of his territory. However, the excursions which had been pre-planned were completed. During this period, Muslims conquered a large part of southern France. Umar bin Abdul Aziz was lucky not to have internal strife and civil wars during his caliphate. He hated bloodshed. Even the Kharijites who had created problems for every government remained relatively peaceful. Their presence had always been a threat to every Islamic government. Umar resolved their differences in a conciliatory manner and forbade the use of arms against them. The governor of Kufa was instructed not to altercate with them unless the instigation was from their side, and a wise man be appointed to negotiate with them. He also invited the leader of the Kharijites to an open forum to discuss the opposing viewpoints, and said that the argument which had the most weight in terms of truth would be accepted. Still, we see that towards the end of Umar's rule, the Kharijites again showed their true colors and created dissension and strife. The ruler of Kufa was given permission to launch an offensive against them, but with certain conditions, that no woman, child, or prisoner would be killed, the injured would not be chased on the battlefield, the spoils of war that would come into their hands would be returned to the family of the Kharijites, and the prisoners of war would only be detained till they repented and reformed themselves. Death. The improvements in Umar's caliphate were gaining momentum when he fell ill in 101 Hijri in the month of Rajab. According to one tradition, his illness was due to natural causes, while another tradition tells us that he was poisoned. Umar's reorganization and reforms had made Banu Umayya very insecure about their future, so they paid one of his slaves a sum of 1,000 coins to poison him. This account further tells us that Umar found out about this treachery, but instead of punishing the culprits and taking revenge, he merely ordered the amount to be returned to the state treasury. For a few days he remained sick. When little hope remained of his recovery, his brother-in-law, Muslima bin Abdul Malik, came to him and said, "O leader of the believers, you have always kept your children away from the riches, and you are leaving them empty-handed. Before you die, instruct me or someone else about your family." Umar bin Abdul Aziz answered, "You want me to leave a will for them. In this issue my helper and supporter is Allah. If my sons are fearful of Allah, He will provide a way for them, and if they indulge in a life of sin, then I don't want to increase them in sin by leaving them an inheritance." Then he called his sons and addressed them with tears in his eyes. "May my life be sacrificed for you, my sons whom I kept in want, in poverty. But I thank Allah that I am leaving you in a good state. You will never meet an Arab or a non-Muslim who would claim any right upon you. My children, your father had 2 options before him. One was to choose the life of luxury for you and hell for himself. The second was to keep you tight and in want, and he would enter heaven. Your father chose the second option. May Allah keep you in His protection. He will provide for you." Before he died, he recited this Quranic verse repeatedly: "The home in the hereafter is for those who choose not to dominate in the earth or create dissension, and the hereafter is only for the God-fearing." When he was in the throes of death, he told everyone to leave the room. Muslima and Umar's wife Fatima were outside his door. They heard a voice saying, "What blessed faces, which are neither of men nor of jinns." Muslima told his sister that Umar must have died. When they went in to check, Umar's soul had departed from his body. He died on a Friday, 101 Hijri, and at the time he was just 39 or 40 years old. He was buried in the area of Dir Saman. The duration of his caliphate had been a mere 2 years and 5 months. At the time of his death, Umar bin Abdul Aziz had 11 sons. He left them an amount of 17 dirhams only, out of which 5 were spent on his shroud and 2 on his grave. Thus he did not even leave 1 dirham each for his children. Hisham bin Abdul Malik, who was Umar's uncle, became one of the future caliphs. He also had 11 sons, and he left them an inheritance of 10 lakhs each. But one of Umar's sons was in later years seen distributing 100 horses in Allah's way, and out of the sons of Hisham, one was spotted asking for charity. Hence Allah accepted the prayer of Umar regarding the provisions to his children. His distinguishing traits. Fear of Allah. Fear of Allah was the most dominant trait in Umar's personality. He was always fearful of the wrath of Allah and his divine punishment, and of the fact that the time to do good deeds in this life could end any moment. His wife states, "He wasn't ahead of others in terms of prayers or fasting, but no one was more God-fearing than him. He used to start shivering in bed when he remembered Allah. Because of his fear, he could not sleep at night. When he mentioned this to a companion once, he asked the reason, to which Umar replied, "I was thinking about the grave and the condition of people in the grave. If we looked at the dead body 3 days later, it would be a gruesome sight. Worms would be crawling over it, and pus would be coming out." Saying these words, Umar collapsed out of intense fear. Umar bin Abdul Aziz remembered death so frequently that his contemporary Yazid bin Koshab commented, "I have never known anyone to fear death more than Umar and Hassan Basri. Looking at their intense fear of death, it seemed as if hell was only designed for the two of them." Humility and modesty. Humility was another dominant trait in Umar's personality. This characteristic became prominent after he became the caliph. We find this humility reflected time and again, and there are numerous examples. Once when he found people standing in his honor, he stated, "O people, if you keep standing, I will also have to stand, and if you sit, then I can also sit. We should only stand before Allah, in prayers." Similarly, once when Riga bin Hayat came to visit him, the flame in the lantern burnt out. A servant was sleeping nearby. Risha asked him if he should wake him up, but Umar asked him to let the servant sleep. Rija suggested that he himself should light the flame. Umar replied that it would be inconsiderate to make a guest perform a chore. Ultimately, Umar got up himself, took some olive oil, and lit the wick. Then stated, "When I got up to perform this task, I was Umar bin Abdul Aziz, and when I returned, I am still the same." Meaning to say that this humble task did not reduce his stature. Once a female slave was fanning him when she dozed off. Umar bin Abdul Aziz took the fan and gave her the same treatment. When she woke up, she was very embarrassed, to which Umar replied, "You are a human like me. I wanted to give you the same comfort as you gave me by fanning you." Spirit of forgiveness. Umar's nature was full of forgiveness and mercy. Once he entered the mosque at night. A man was sleeping there. In the darkness, Umar's feet accidentally tripped over him. The man screamed, "Are you crazy?" Umar simply replied, "No." His servant wanted to punish this uncouth man instantly, but Umar restrained him and explained that the man had merely asked him if he was mad, to which he replied in the negative. We find another example of his forgiving nature. Once, when after hours of hard work, Umar was getting up for his afternoon nap, a man approached him with some documents. Because of his carelessness, the file hit Umar's face. The papers cut his cheek, and it started to bleed. But he still attentively read the person's application and attended to his need. Patience and tolerance. Umar had the patience of a saint. He experienced a very tough period in his life when his most able and dearest son, Abdul Malik, his favorite brother Sahal bin Abdul Aziz, and his most loyal servant Mazahim died within a short span of time. When people visited him to offer their condolence, they found him to be patient and grateful. One day a contemporary scholar Rabbi came to him to offer his condolence. Hearing his words, Umar bent his neck downwards. The man sitting near Rabbi told him that he had upset the leader of the faithful, to which Umar stated, "By the one who ordained their deaths, I do not wish that these events had not occurred." He further sent an order throughout the Muslim empire that no mourning shall be done in this regard. Simplicity. The changes that took place in the lifestyle of Umar bin Abdul Aziz after he became a caliph have been touched upon. He preferred a life of simple living for himself and his family members. The robe that he wore was made of the cheapest cloth, and there were patches on his garment. One sheet of cloth would last him for 6 months. The same would be washed every Friday. Once he was late for the prayer. When somebody asked him, he explained that his only garment was being washed by his servant, and there was no other garment to wear. When he fell ill before his death, his brother-in-law Muslima came to inquire about his health. He noticed that the caliph was wearing a dirty torn shirt. Muslima requested his sister, the wife of Umar, to wash the garment. Next day when he arrived, he found Umar wearing the same shirt. He asked his sister why she had not listened to him, as it was embarrassing in front of people coming to visit him. She replied that those were the only clothes he had. Similarly, he chose to eat very simple food. Once one of his servants complained that he was tired of eating the same pulses every day. Fatima replied that his master also ate the same. In fact, after his caliphate, he did not even eat heartily. Umar bin Abdul Aziz was very particular about simple food and earning an honest means of livelihood. One instance demonstrates his viewpoint in this regard. His relatives had come for a visit, and Umar told the cook not to hurry in the meal. By mid-afternoon time, the guests were very hungry, so Umar laid out satu, a drink, and dates for them. When they had had enough of these two things, the servants brought out the food. The guests declined because they were full. Umar told them, "Then why do you eat fire?" Meaning to say that if a simple diet can suffice, then why earn money in the wrong way for lavish meals which would ultimately land a person into hellfire? There was such a paucity of regular household items in his house that an Iraqi woman who had come to ask for stipends for her daughters was amazed. When she expressed her surprise, Umar's wife Fatima answered her, "Trying to fulfill the wants of people like you has made our house a desolate place." Umar would remain busy in official work, spending long hours until late in the night. Then when he had time to lie down on the bed, he would recite the verses of the Quran, and he used to become restless. His wife relates that he was once reciting this verse in prayers, "When people will be spread about like moths and the mountains will be like fluffs of wool." He collapsed again and again out of sheer terror. Once she thought that he would die on the spot. Umar had reserved a portion of the house for prayers. He used to spend a large part of the night in prayer and woeful distress. He was so punctual about the prayer timings that if the muazzin, one who calls for the prayers, was a little late in calling the azan, he would send him a message to remind him of the time for prayers. Anas relates that he had never seen someone so closely follow the Prophet in his prayers as Umar bin Abdul Aziz. To emulate Rasul Allah in the Sunnah acts of worship, he would fast on Mondays and Thursdays. Love of the Prophet and the Prophet's family. Umar's love for Rasul Allah was tremendous. If he found any memento of the Prophet's, he would hold it close to his heart. The Prophet had given some land to a companion, and he had written an account of it. A person from that family showed the written document to Umar, who kissed and held it to his eyes. His attachment for the family of the Prophet, and his exemplary treatment towards them stemmed from his love for the Prophet, Before him, Banu Umayyah had treated the family of the Prophet very unkindly, but Umar acted in an altogether different manner. Once a slave appeared before him with a request. He was from the family of slaves who served Banu Hashim and had come with the purpose of asking for an allowance. When he mentioned the name of Ali bin Abi Talib, R.A., Umar's eyes became wet with tears, and he stated that he himself was the slave of Ali. He further explained that Rasulullah had said that whoever considered him a master also should take Ali, R.A., as a master. Then, Umar rewarded the slave handsomely for his association with Ali. Similarly, once many of members from the clan of Banu Umayyah were waiting at his door. But when Umar first called in the slave of Abdullah bin Abbas, R.A., his cousin Hisham objected. "After doing so much to our family, Umar is still not satisfied. Now he lets a slave of Abdullah bin Abbas walk all over us." Umar had deep reverence in his heart for Medina because of his love for the Prophet, When he left Medina for Syria, he turned back with glistening eyes and said to his servant Mazahim, "I hope we are not among those people that Medina has spitted out." This referred to the hadith of the Prophet, in which he says that Medina is a furnace that churns out all the filth, leaving only the pure behind. Piety was the cornerstone of Umar's existence. The reason Umar is superior among the religious and the pious is the fact that kingship had moved him closer to God, whereas it moves most people away from God. We hope that on the Day of Judgment Allah will shelter Umar under his shade in the category of just kings. On that fearsome day there will be no other shade. Muhammad bin Ma'bud relates that when he appeared before the king of Rome, he found him sitting on the floor in a state of depression. On being asked the reason for his sorrow, he answered that the man of piety had died. On further inquiry, he pronounced the name of Umar bin Abdul Aziz. Then he added, After Jesus, if anyone could revive the dead, it was Umar bin Abdul Aziz. I am not impressed with the monk who closed his door and left the world, and got busy in his prayers. I am amazed at the man who was offered the world on a pedestal, and he rejected it with disdain. After the death of Umar bin Abdul Aziz, Yazid, the son of Abdul Malik bin Marwan, became the caliph. Alas, he undid all the good that Umar had done and reversed the reforms made in the system. Hence, Umar's effort to change monarchy into caliphate only lasted until his death. It is said that in the beginning, Yazid tried to follow Umar in his footsteps, but he could not sustain the pressure for more than 40 days. He did not possess the courage, strong will, and self-restraint needed to withstand all the difficulties. In the words of Allama Iqbal, the world never had the rule of love. The reason is that love is no hypocrite.